You are listening to Third House Podcast, where we blend astrology, witchcraft, and creativity to design our own magical lives. I'm your host, Brittany Pastuhov, a psychic tarot reader, astrologer, and coach dedicated to helping ambitious witches overcome their fears and forge fulfilling, spiritually aligned vocational paths. Whether you're looking for guidance through astrology readings, tarot, or my signature astro-empowerment coaching, this is your space for inspiration. It's my hope that these episodes push you to embrace your dreams and turn them into reality. Let's dive into the magic.
Welcome to Third House Podcast. This is your July 2026 forecast, and I am re-recording the first half of the forecast because in a Mercury retrograde event, the first half of the recording was corrupted and the file is gone now. So I had to re-record it. And I'm sorry that this is late. It was supposed to be out by July 1st, but things happened. I also am changing some things about the forecast. So you may have noticed it's not a lunar cycle forecast, it's a forecast for July, the month ahead. That is what I'm going to be doing moving forward. It's just easier for business reasons to do a July 2026 astrology forecast, although I do love working with the lunar cycles. I'm going to be changing some more things about the podcast after I come back from summer vacation. But for now, just enjoy this forecast. And we do have, basically the biggest month of fiery 2026 going on right now. It's going to be a weird month, even weirder than usual. The fire horse really picks up speed. It's a turning point for us. There's a ton of outer planet aspects this month. So it's a really important one to pay attention to. Even if things don't seem to make sense during this month, they may have effects that affect you later on in the year. And who knows, for longer term potentially. So worth getting into. Jupiter, we are going to go over some of the things that have already happened since I last forecasted, such as Mercury retrograde starting, Jupiter in Leo, and Chiron into Taurus. One of the bigger things that's happening this month is the Neptune-Pluto sextile perfecting, and that will be later on in July. So yeah, expect things to get weird in July. Think of it kind of like something that it's not necessarily, I often say that we can kind of direct transits in our lives, but when it's a lot of these outer planet transits, like Mars and Uranus conjunction, Neptune-Pluto sextile, with Saturn and Pluto and Uranus involved, and Neptune, and to some extent Jupiter, it's kind of like tectonic plates shifting underneath you. Like there's not much you could do about it. It's just the atmosphere. It's just what's happening. And what we can do is have an optimistic perspective and adapt, and also just look forward and know that this month is going to involve some shifts. And then we'll head into eclipse season in August as well. But we're used to changes because we've been living, I've been forecasting since 2016. So, I had to become intrepid. June 19th, Chiron entered Taurus from Aries. This is a preview transit. We have Chiron here from June 19th through September 18th of 2026. Then Chiron returns to the later degrees of Aries and then comes back into Taurus for the longer transit starting in 2027. So this is kind of your 6-month preview of what Chiron and Taurus may be like for you. Taurus is a sign, fixed earth sign ruled by Venus. It's where the seeds that have been planted are rooting and growing to bloom, which can take a long time. Like we have apple trees that we planted years ago that are just starting to bloom and fruit, right? So Taurus is fixed because it sustains, it takes time, it moves at the pace of Mother Earth, which sometimes, especially with Uranus recently there, can be quite fast, but also often takes time to rewild. You plant trees, and sometimes it's for future generations to enjoy and not necessarily for you to enjoy their shade. So that's kind of the time scale of Taurus. With Chiron here, I do think that, a lot of the wounding and healing that's happening, because Chiron is known as the wounded healer, a teacher of heroes in mythology, also an initiator, is earth-based healing and healing the earth itself. I also think that there will be more emphasis on, of course, bodily health, but specifically female bodies or feminine bodies, like, and that is an area of health and medicine that has been neglected for so long and is just starting to get more research and study that will have more awareness of the need for it and more healing there, as well as like earth-based healing methods or herbal healing methods. The economy in general, represented by Taurus on Wall Street, there is a statue of a bull, which is a symbol of Taurus. The economy, wounds and healings around concepts of stability, sustainability, and prosperity, and what is real versus what is with money and abstract representation of the real, value and exchange. So those are kind of some areas where we're healing or feeling the wound or the illness that needs to heal with Chiron and Taurus in the next 6 months, and then for a longer transit starting in 2027. So it depends on your personal chart, like what area of life this might show up in, but you may have felt the shift June 19th, right before the summer solstice. The sun is in the sign of Cancer now, sign that often has to do with water and the meeting of like the height of or the beginning of summer, at least in the Northeast, and going to the water or the beach to cool off. That spending time with family in the summer vacations starting, right? Like Cancer season is very much about kind of home, family, and taking time to. Water is very cleansing, right? To cleanse and let go and play and remember what it was like to have summer vacation, which for many adults is not really a thing anymore, but we still take our vacations, we still take our time off, we still take our time, especially with this Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So this Mercury retrograde started June 29th, and it's a time to reconsider what we thought we knew, to revisit the past, ideas of home and family, maybe old emotional pain and vulnerabilities. It's time to rebirth and transform ourselves, to feel and create or recreate, revise artworks, which is how I like to use Mercury retrograde sometimes, to enhance and rebuild our trust with intuition and sensitivity, to recommit to caring about something or protecting something that we value, to encounter magic and tricksters and engage with tricky ideas, very Mercury, to move between worlds and states of being like the element of water. Okay, so Mercury retrogrades, they slow down and speed up time. It gets very spirally. It's not just about technology glitching, which like happened to me because I'm re-recording this, but it's also about having to slow down and repeat things and rethink things. Jupiter entered Leo June 30th. So Jupiter just got into Leo from Cancer. We no longer have our exalted Jupiter in Cancer kind of protecting us. I know it's very popular to like for astrologers right now to say, oh, Jupiter in Cancer is like, it's not all that great. It hasn't been that great, but protection often, for example, when Jupiter might be transiting your 12th house of your chart, or when Jupiter is transiting in a sign of exaltation while we have a lot of other things going on, like a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, aspects to Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus entering Gemini, you don't always know what didn't happen. You don't always know what you were protected from. It's often hidden from you. So losing the exalted Jupiter is a little bit of a loss of a buffer maybe from some of these other planets, but Jupiter in Leo is also a really great thing. It's in the sign of the sun, which is Jupiter's buddy. Like they're both can be beneficial. It's a good sign for Jupiter. It's not exaltation, but it is certainly kingly and royal sign for Jupiter. So we have good things happening with Jupiter in Leo. Usually good for people with Leo like placements, sun, moon rising. It's also just a time for growth, for creativity and self-expression, for personal growth. Leo having very much to do with like the self, the inner self and expressing the inner self and play, learning more about yourself, a surge in bravery and confidence, or maybe a push to be brave, like some kind of challenge that requires one to be braver. Ultimately, good luck coming from confident or courageous decisions. Good luck coming from generosity. I think that like Jupiter transits, it's not always just gifts that fall in your lap. Sometimes it really can be, but other times you do have to actually, as with most transits, take an action in the direction that you want to go in order to reap the best benefits of a Jupiter transit. And that is going to depend on the house of your chart, which is transiting. And if you want more information about some of these outer planet transits, how they're affecting you, I can do a chart reading for that as well. I do wayfinding readings where we look in detail at the next 6 months. I do natal chart readings, but that won't be as much about the transit. So you can book me online for that. But in general, good luck for creative endeavors, general good fortune, financial growth, expanded generosity. Can also go both ways and be kind of like overspendy because the sun is aligned with gold and the sign of Leo is aligned with kind of gold and money. So that is where I'm getting that from. Expansion can go both ways. Opportunities to step into leadership or positions of authority, developments for children and education, inner child healing for those who are looking for it, having opportunities become available, healing joy, healing play. That's all Jupiter in Leo stuff. Jupiter was last in Leo from July 16th of 2014 through August 11th of 2015. So you can think about what was going on for you during that period. That might have something to do with the upcoming Jupiter, the present Jupiter in Leo transit, and what you could learn from that period 12 years ago, what you would like to bring in from this period 12 years later. As you do every 12 years, Jupiter comes back to the same sign. Okay, there's some harmony. Things get more fiery. There's some harmony between the Jupiter in Leo and the other fire planets here, Neptune and Saturn in Aries. There's also big aspects, the trine and then sextile Uranus and Gemini, opposite Pluto in Aquarius. So this also mitigates some of how Jupiter's luck presents or how beneficial Jupiter can be. Jupiter, a lot of what you want to expand can still happen, but there also may be something dissolving in the vein of Neptune and Saturn at the same time. Okay, so that was all before July 1st. The next big transit becomes exact, is currently present, but becomes exact on July 4th. We have Mars meeting Uranus in Gemini exactly. It's going to be at 3 degrees, 52 minutes of Gemini. This can be very volatile. So I think July 4th, it's volatile in terms at least of ideas and communication. I've talked about Uranus and Gemini kind of splitting realities, not in a literal, like I think we're on different timeline kind of sense, but in a people have such different perspectives that they're living in a different reality perspective-wise, psychologically, with Gemini. So yeah, definitely fireworks, but more along the lines of like air and ideas and communication. There are some other aspects happening at the same time, though. You can see this little mini trine here. There's a trine to Pluto. There's Pluto sextile Neptune already in effect, and then Uranus and Mars sextile Neptune as well. So they're all working together. This Mars-Uranus conjunction is bound up with the Uranus-Pluto trine, which is a larger cycle that will be, and that aspect will be exact on the 18th of July. It's a continuation of this Promethean and Dionysian cycle that symbolizes both a creative gestation period for humanity and a death rebirth theme. But Mars involved, I think, indicates a darker turn into endings and difficulties. America's 250th birthday, I guess, July 4th. So we'll see. Mars sextile Neptune. We have this conjunction also making the sextile to Neptune in Aries. So to me, that indicates that this surprise kind of explosion, or at the very least, an intellectual discovery or insight, has something to do with a wave of new ideas that is percolating in society since Neptune entered the sign of Aries, kind of volcanic lava overflow. As lava kind of heats up and it changes the landscape the way lava hardens into rock, which would be a metaphor for the Saturn conjunction with Neptune as it cools. Remember, Neptune and Saturn had their conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries on February 20th of this year, which was a huge turning point. So we are seeing more kind of results or developments from that with this these major sextiles and this trine, Uranus-Pluto trine. Okay. The 5th is when like that trine between Mars and Pluto becomes exact. So you have between the 4th and the 5th, but it's all applying now. On the 6th, we have the Sun in Cancer squaring Saturn exactly. So all of these transits, you can think of them for building for at least a week beforehand. With the outer planet transits, much longer, like the Uranus-Pluto trine, since Uranus entered Gemini. But at least a week building, and then at least a week after to integrate or understand or feel the effects of it. So Sun square Saturn, sometimes caring, because Cancer is all about caring. Caring about someone can mean choosing not to enable bad behavior, choosing to allow someone young or immature to grow up or have a hard life lesson without buffering them to their detriment. It's a hard balance. So this is one of those brief tensions that may ask you to consider the long-term effects of a choice, where Saturn is consequences and responsibility. Neptune stations retrograde at 4 degrees of Aries on the 7th. I'm not big on outer planet retrogrades and interpreting them because they're like half the year that all the outer planets are retrograde. When it matters to me is when you have a personal planet in the first 4 degrees of Aries, because you're essentially getting something reversing and running back over your personal planet or point. But in general, we're kind of in review here. What's the greater sea change that Neptune in the sign of the new, the innovative, the brand new age, combined with Saturn, is bringing? So considering how this has affected us so far, at least since February 20th, to see what will be in your own life or in the wider culture. On the 9th, we have, later in the day of the 9th, Venus will enter Virgo. If you are not watching the video, there's a video on YouTube where I show the chart as I'm talking. So Venus enters Virgo on July 9th. Venus here in this sign is traditionally in her fall, which means she's more interested in refining the details of beauty than perhaps in creating balanced relationship, because a constant striving towards improvement and perfection can be anathema to the messiness of love or with another person or self-love and the necessary ease of pleasure. And because Venus in Virgo can be very independent and self-contained and sovereign, virgin meaning the traditional concept of virgin meaning unmarried woman who is independent, rather than necessarily the way we think of it as sexually inexperienced now. Venus here can also teach us the beauty of small things and a holy kind of gratitude for them. And I also think Venus in Virgo is kind of a savior for these July transits because she's earthy and she's discerning. So Virgo is a sign that's all about analysis. So using discernment, using critical thinking skills, using discernment in relationships, but also the kind of tact that Venus is known for, to choose when to say things and when to hold your tongue. There's a lot that might happen this month that could be confusing or be revealed later with more information. And so it would be really helpful, especially with these volatile Gemini planets, to use discernment and critical thinking skills first, and perhaps not react, but wait to respond. At least that's how I'll be trying to use it, which, astrologers can't always take their own advice, but we can attempt to use the transits in the way that it is for everyone's highest good. Okay, on the 12th, we have Mercury retrograde meeting the Sun. So that's a Mercury cazimi with Mercury retrograde. So that clarifies something about this whole retrograde's themes for you. Something from the past, ideas we're reconsidering, or emotions becomes more clear on July 12th, about halfway through the retrograde. And then on the 13th, we have Venus in Virgo square Uranus in Gemini. So Venus, of this goddess-like perfection and independent radiance, faces off with Uranus in Gemini, who just maybe wants to try some shit out without proper education or preparation or regard for consequences. And since Venus's job is to discern, though the larger social impulse or spirit of Uranus is very powerful, this is a time to use discernment in your choices of healing, relating, or creating. And all may not be as it seems during this month, especially with Mercury still retrograde and heightened emotion. So notice on that square where discernment would be necessary. And then we have our new moon on July 14th. and that is at 22 degrees of Cancer, conjunct Mercury at 19 degrees, 50 minutes, so about 20 degrees of Cancer. The Mercury cazimi on the 12th clarifies something, and the new moon takes that further, allowing us to release maybe some old emotions or past hurts in order to continue. It's not the easiest new moon to begin totally anew, like I would often recommend with a new moon. There's still work to do in the spiral of time with Mercury continuing to be retrograde, still maybe vacationing to do or time to take off in order to integrate something. So I would choose release and revisiting something. It's a very lunar, kind of dark moon in Cancer, very dreamy and available for psychic, intuitive kind of work, maybe past life work, but also very intense at the same time. And it's July 15th, and there's still so much more. So I would definitely recommend going back to the 2026 forecast, which is on my YouTube channel and my podcast, to revisit some of these larger transits that are happening, like Neptune and Saturn in Aries, like Jupiter in Leo, Chiron in Taurus, Pluto in Aquarius, definitely, and Uranus in Gemini. I also have shorter videos that are clipped from that forecast if you just want to look at like the different ingresses of planets through different signs. Just to recap, like why these transits are so big and what has happened in history so far and what they could mean for our future. Because I can't possibly go into this in the 1 month forecast, but I do have it on my channel. So on, let's see, the 19th is the next major transit that's exact, and that is a Mars in Gemini sextile to Saturn in Aries. It's kind of like Mars is a soldier going to the general for advice. A little nod to that, to the general. We have something getting done potentially here, maybe in your own life, but it needs to be done strategically. Mars at this point is far enough away from Uranus to be considered no longer conjunct, as the conjunction is separating. So less influence of that unpredictable world-shaking power of Uranus to change ideas, but still in the same sign. What is the long-term kind of goal, since there have been so many shakeups already during this cycle, and particularly this month of July? On the 20th, we have Jupiter in Leo, trine Neptune in Aries. This is kind of an expansion of that new beginning feeling, that pioneering fantasy that Neptune in Aries has. Jupiter kind of lighting a fire under you to imagine and dream more, or to make that dream happen. Again, Neptune is retrograde, but that's true for like half the year every year. So there is this with Jupiter in a fire sign making these trines to Neptune and Saturn in Aries, there's a little more like support in that way, or some more blessings for what your Neptune Saturn project of building based on belief or a dream, or what you're pioneering, if there is something in wherever the Aries house of your chart is. So if it's in the first house of your chart, it may be that you're like really changing your belief in yourself, or changing a lot about how you look, how your appearance matches your inner world. If it's in the seventh house, it may be about building a dream with somebody else. If it's in the 10th, it may be about building career. I don't usually do those videos where we go through every like instance, but I do readings if you're interested in how these larger transits are impacting your specific life and not just in the world. So an expansion of that pioneering kind of fantasy, which you can also see in the world as people become pioneers of different ideas, or even religions or spiritualities. And there may be conflict about it, but there's certainly some fire behind it, with Jupiter in Leo supporting. I would say in this case, I like the version that is creative self-expression and making a dream come true. With Jupiter and Leo, I think that speaks the most to my clients and what they are trying to do. So that's July 20th. And then July 21st, we have the exact sextile between Jupiter and Uranus and Gemini. So again, all these aspects are in play. These are just the days and times when they become exact. So as they apply, consider it to be like about a week ahead of time, and then still in effect until about a week after, especially with such large planets at play, at least a week. This is a friendly aspect. Again, fire feeds the oxygen, oxygen feeds the fire, sorry. Air feeds the fire. So creativity, again, is heating up with that sextile to Uranus, again, fueling that kind of fantasy with Neptune. Just making sure that, like, even if it's a large idea or a big project, that there's some discernment, right? Venus and Virgo, that there's some detail orientation or grounding in reality to it, to not get too far off course. But there's definitely a lot of like creativity and fueling of the fires of inspiration here, because we need pioneers and we need new ways of thinking, and we need new ideas and solutions to problems in society as we're transforming. So July 22nd, we have the sun moving into Leo. That's the official beginning of Leo season. It's actually July 22nd. And then, of course, applying to a Jupiter conjunction, which is traditionally seen as lucky when the sun meets Jupiter, or certainly very expansive, kind of joyful aspect. Leo season, so time of fixed fire, like tending campfires, tending love and fun and play. It's usually as we head into August and late July, when much of the world goes on holiday during Leo season. It's about self-expression, children, childhood, play, creativity, fun, games, also leadership and authority and loyalty, but courage, confidence, dignity, pride. It's about warmth and generosity, right? All this, and it's hot. And it's too hot to work. And so the sun is at full force in Leo season, which of course the sun rules that sign. Then on the 23rd, we have Mercury. On the 23rd, Mercury stations direct, 16 Cancer. And you can start to integrate all the healing and reconsidering and retracing your steps that you probably did during that retrograde when Mercury stations direct. And immediately on the 24th, Mercury makes a sextile to Venus in Virgo, a nod to use discernment to sort through feelings or even the narrative of what happened in the last 3 weeks, what's happening now. Herbs or plant medicines, a grounded friend or partner could be useful for this. Obviously, not medical advice. But it's just that you don't have to do things alone. As Cancer, Mercury reminds Venus in Virgo, we can care for each other. So as you are celebrating the end of Mercury retrograde, don't forget the integration period, which is usually when most of the insights happen. You're riding the waves before with Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Okay, on the 25th, we have Neptune. Let's see. Yeah, we have Neptune in Aries, sextile Pluto. This is, again, part of one of those larger cycles. I did note that on the whole Neptune-Pluto cycle that H.G. Wells published War of the Worlds a few years into the current Neptune-Pluto cycle during the Neptune-Pluto conjunction, and that captivated the public's imagination with stories of extraterrestrials, of course. And that kind of like started the whole, I mean, some would say it's culturally started the whole kind of fascination with aliens and considering those phenomena to be about aliens and extraterrestrials, which we associate with them now. But that was, H.G. Wells at the start of this Neptune-Pluto cycle. I am not suggesting that literally fiction will become reality. That's not what I'm saying. It's much too literal for me. If there is extraterrestrial intelligence, I consider it to be evident from science-spirit interactions with other species. I think the fallacy has always been that humans are the only intelligent ones. Obviously, it's always possible, but I'm not saying that that's happening this month. It's possible that like the government would release declassified UFO information that nobody will really care about or be surprised by again. We'll view it as a distraction for more relevant issues. But I do think that using the example of a book of fiction, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, the imaginal realm, the cultural imagination is influenced by these ideas, the ideas of aliens and other spirits. We're dreaming a kind of rebirth and expanding and rearranging our world now in this part of the cycle. And so that book becomes kind of resonant again in a cultural sense. As far as war goes, astrologers, including myself, like human war, have predicted a major war during this period. And unfortunately, with Russia invading Ukraine, I think it's probably already coming to pass. The United States cultural civil war, which has been ongoing for a while, potentially becoming a more material reality. Nobody wants this. These are predictions based on data and based on the assumption that humans err often and seem to make the same mistakes cyclically. Since this is, again, tectonic plates shifting, it's much bigger than you or me. We can aim for an optimistic future and attempt peace insofar as our sphere of influence reaches. So we can get together to actively create peace and call for peace in the wider world, to create community together. We can imagine new realities. We can analyze and see the cultural shifts that happen as certain archetypes become like the alien become fascinating to the cultural imagination. As artists, we can also tap into that and use that, and probably unconsciously still would, whether or not we were listening to an astrology podcast. All of this is possible. When I'm predicting things or talking about culturally relevant subjects, I don't want people to interpret that as a very literal prediction, because it's so much more nuanced than all of that. And it usually shows up in very different ways through culture. July 26th, Saturn stations retrograde. Again, boring. I don't really care when big planets station retrograde. But it's a little less structured now, a little more reconsidering and rethinking what we're building long term, which is important for all long term projects, kind of planning and reorganizing. And it's much more much more personal if your moon, for example, is at 14 Aries and Saturn will be, reversing just to like drive over your moon again. That's going to feel a lot more personal in a Sati or another personal planet in Aries than for other people who don't have something there. So really, it's the movement back and forth over a personal planet that makes a retrograde of an outer planet the most relevant for you. If you don't have that, don't worry about it too much. Okay, and on the 26th, I'm using a true node calculation. The North Node shifts from Pisces into Aquarius. Okay, so this is like a really big kind of cultural shift in the direction that we're going. We've been in a cycle with North Node in Pisces that was pointing us toward spiritual awareness of suffering or wisdom through suffering, kind of an enlightenment and like a mystical spiritual framework, but through suckiness and things sucking and gaining spiritual awareness through all of that suffering. Now, North Node in Aquarius is very much about, again, a cultural push toward thinking about the alien and alienation, the individual versus society, or in other ways, the individual bringing something back from a kind of quest and giving it to the rest of the community. So this North Node in Aquarius, this nodal shift is pointing us toward a future. I'm not sure which future yet, but I think it's our responsibility also to imagine what that future could look like. And it also heralds the almost arrival of eclipse season, which for us will be in August. So that's July 26th. Okay. Did I somehow not print out my notes on the full moon? Hold on. Okay, a couple other things going on here. The sun opposes Pluto on the 27th. So the sun is effectively life, and Pluto is effectively the ruler of the underworld, death. They face off on this day and also on the full moon, which is coming up on July 29th in this forecast. So we've got sun opposite Pluto. It's a kind of cosmic and mythological play. It's a transit that does occur once every year with sun opposite Pluto. Summer's reaching its hottest days typically in the Northeast, so it's both full of life and harvest and plant life and also deadly hot. Hold the paradox. The sun is also trine Neptune in Aries, accessing that creative well of information that Neptune is making available in the dreaming at this time. It's also sextile Uranus in Gemini, which is potent for inspiration and creative change. On the 29th, we have Venus in Virgo, square Mars in Gemini. Venus in Virgo sorts, organizes, and discerns the information that Mars in Gemini seeks out with energetic curiosity and spouts without concern for accuracy necessarily. For individuals, I'd say find some balance between production and consumption of information, balance in relationships, discern before sharing with others. Um, Information and just what's in the air or the ether of culture is wild this month. So staying offline is probably wise, honestly, and keeping thoughts to yourself is probably wise as well. Just letting it ride out and observing is most likely one of the wisest ways to spend this transit, other than actively creating, reflecting, engaged in spiritual process, or engaged in community making, which can be tense at times, but also rewarding during this time. Okay, and then on the 29th, we also have the sun meeting Jupiter at 6 degrees of Leo. Um, it's always kind of a good day of the year because the sun is beneficial. We love it. It keeps us warm. It's bright. And Jupiter is lucky and beneficial and generous. Of course, there can be more difficult effects. The sun can burn you. Jupiter can expand things too much. But it should be a very bright and fiery transit and is generally seen as a day of blessings. It is, however, also on this full moon in Aquarius that is conjunct Pluto. So it's not that simple, July 29th. Let me go to the full moon chart. Okay. Full moon chart has that full moon at 6 degrees of Aquarius, conjunct Pluto, opposite Jupiter and the sun at their conjunction. I mean, full moon's always opposite the sun, but it's relevant because it's the Jupiter-Sun conjunction. There's a parallel and a trine from this full moon to Uranus in Gemini. It's sextile Neptune in Aries. So it's bringing in a lot of this outer planet stuff. It's a giant concert that's at once harmonious and dissonant. The moon conjunct Pluto in this austere Saturn-ruled sign of Aquarius is offering no warmth in its light this month. Plenty of insights, though, about the shadows and imagined reflections that are created in the half darkness of the full moon's light. The opposition emphasizes this polarity of light and shadow, warmth and cold. It's a moon to think with, but not necessarily to believe in or act with, one that asks you to keep your wits about you. The aspect to Gemini indicates an easy flow of inspiration as well as high strangeness. The sextile to Neptune concurs. These are quite a lot of close outer planet aspects for a full moon to contend with, and so I would say that this one at best will reveal some deep truth in sharp relief to those who are paying attention. So in conclusion, for your July forecast, we are heading from this month of July, this wild ride of July, into August eclipse season. May the wind be always at your back. May your sails be full. Stay ahead of the fray and find peace and beauty within it. And I will record an August forecast for you too.